At 7:42 a.m. on September 19, 1944, Lieutenant Edwin Leiper watched a 75mm German tank gun emerge from fog so thick he could barely see 30 feet. The Panther tank weighed 45 tons. His M18 Hellcat weighed 17 tons. The Panther's frontal armor was 80mm of hardened steel. His frontal armor was 13mm, barely enough to stop rifle bullets. The German gun could kill him at 2,000 yards. His gun could not penetrate that Panther from the front at any range, not at 1,000 yards, not at 500 yards, not even at point-blank range. And there were not one Panther coming through that fog. There were 45 Panthers, plus 36 Panzer Mark IVs bearing down on his position. 81 German tanks against his 4 tank destroyers. Every American tank crew in France had called the M18 a death trap, a suicide machine, a pathetic toy that would get good men killed. In exactly 46 minutes, Leiper and his crews would prove every single one of them wrong. 26 years old. 3 months commanding a tank destroyer platoon. 0 engagements against Panther tanks before this morning. Edwin Leiper was a farm boy from rural Pennsylvania who had joined the Army in 1942 because his country needed men and farming did not pay enough to support a family. He was not special. He was not a tactical genius. He had not graduated from West Point or attended any elite military academy. He was just another lieutenant doing his job in a war that had already killed millions. But on Hill 246 near Ericourt, France, on that foggy September morning, Edwin Leiper would command one of the most lopsided armored engagements in World War II history. 4 American tank destroyers would face an entire German Panzer brigade. The kill ratio would be so extreme that military historians would study this battle for the next 80 years, trying to understand how it was even possible. The German 5th Panzer Army had launched its counteroffensive at dawn. Hitler had personally ordered the attack. Stop Patton's Third Army. Recapture the city of Nancy. Drive the Americans back across the Moselle River. The 111th and 113th Panzer Brigades had received brand new Panther tanks straight from the factory. Young crews mostly inexperienced, but the Panthers themselves were the most feared tanks in the European theater. Excellent armor, excellent gun, excellent mobility for their weight class. Soviet tankers on the Eastern Front had learned to fear the Panther's long 75mm gun. American tankers in France were learning the same lesson the hard way. The 4th Armored Division had lost 14 Sherman medium tanks and 7 Stuart light tanks in just the previous 3 days of fighting around Ericourt. 25 men killed, 88 wounded. Most died when German 75mm and 88mm guns punched through their frontal armor at ranges exceeding 1,000 yards. Sherman crews knew the math. In a straight fight at range, German tanks won, every single time. And now the Germans were sending their newest, most powerful tanks in a massive coordinated assault. The 113th Panzer Brigade alone fielded 45 Panthers and 36 Panzer Mark IVs. 81 tanks moving in column formation toward Combat Command A's headquarters at Ericourt. If they broke through, they would annihilate the American command structure. Officers' communications equipment supply depots, everything that made coordinated defense possible, would be destroyed in minutes. The only thing standing between those 81 German tanks and total disaster was Edwin Leiper's platoon. 4 M18 Hellcat tank destroyers. 4 machines that nobody believed in. 4 crews that everyone expected to die. The M18 Hellcat had entered combat service in July 1944, just 2 months before this engagement. The 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion received the first production M18S in May, while still training in England. They were the guinea pig battalion. Test the new machine in actual combat. Report problems. Recommend modifications. When Captain Thomas Evans of Company C first saw the M18S being unloaded from transport ships, he had watched his men examine the new machines with visible concern. The armor was thinner than the M8 armored car. The turret was open to the sky. One well-placed mortar round would kill the entire crew. The M18 weighed 17 tons compared to the Sherman's 30 tons. It carried a 76mm gun, the same weapon mounted on later Sherman variants. Good enough against Panzer Mark IVs. Marginal at best against Panthers. Completely useless against the frontal armor of Tiger tanks. But the M18 had one advantage that every other tank destroyer lacked. Speed. The Wright Continental R975 C1 radial engine produced 400 horsepower. That gave the Hellcat a power-to-weight ratio of 22 horsepower per ton. For comparison, the Sherman medium tank managed 13 horsepower per ton. The Panther managed 13.8. The M18 could reach 55 miles per hour on paved roads. Actual combat conditions reduced that to perhaps 40 miles per hour on good terrain, but even at reduced speeds. The M18 was faster than any other tracked armored vehicle in the war. General Andrew Bruce had designed the tank destroyer doctrine years before America entered the war. Bruce predicted that future conflicts would feature massed tank attacks. Blitzkrieg tactics, armored columns punching through defensive lines. The solution was not heavier tanks. The solution was fast mobile tank destroyers that could respond rapidly to breakthrough attempts. Find the enemy. Hit the enemy. Withdraw before the enemy responds. Never sit still. Never fight fair. Never trade shots with heavy armor from static positions. The doctrine sounded brilliant in staff meetings at Fort Hood, Texas. In combat against Panthers, whose crews had survived 2 years of fighting on the Eastern Front, the doctrine looked like organized suicide. Sherman crews openly mocked the M18 when it first arrived in France. Tank destroyer crews from the older M10 battalions called it a suicide machine. The armor could not stop anything. The gun could not penetrate Panther frontal armor. What good was speed if you died before you could use it? At 7:45 a.m. on September 19th, Leiper's 4M18S reached the crest of Hill 246. Captain William Dwight, a liaison officer from the 37th Tank Battalion, had spotted the German column 15 minutes earlier while driving his Jeep. He had raced back to Combat Command A's headquarters, screaming about Panthers, dozens of Panthers moving through the fog toward their position. Colonel Bruce Clark had given the order immediately. Take a platoon of tank destroyers, get to Hill 246, stop them. Leiper's crews had just dismounted when the first Panther appeared out of the fog at the base of the hill. The German tank was less than 100 yards away. Its long-barreled 75mm gun swept left and right, searching for targets it could not see through the dense morning mist. The Panther commander was standing in his cupola, scanning with binoculars, trying to make sense of the white curtain that reduced visibility to almost nothing. Sergeant Stacy commanded the lead M18. He had perhaps 15 seconds to make a decision that would either prove the tank destroyer doctrine worked or confirm that the M18 was exactly what everyone said it was. A pathetic machine that would get good men killed for no reason. Stacy's gunner traversed the turret. The electric motor hummed smoothly. The M18's turret could complete a full 360-degree rotation in under 20 seconds. The Panther's turret was traversed by hand crank. It took nearly a minute for a full rotation. That difference was the only advantage Stacy had. The gunner acquired the target. The Panther's hull filled the sight picture. Range 75 yards. The German crew had not seen them yet. The fog was too thick. The M18's low silhouette made it nearly impossible to spot from below. Stacy gave the order. Fire. At 7:46 and 15 seconds, the 76mm gun fired. The shell crossed 75 yards in a fraction of a second. It struck the Panther's right track assembly. The track shattered. The Panther lurched to a halt. Smoke poured from the damaged suspension. The German crew began evacuating immediately. They knew a second shot was coming. They knew their tank was dead. Stacy's loader rammed another round into the breech. 7 seconds. The gunner fired again. This round penetrated the Panther's thinner side armor. The tank erupted in flames. Orange fire billowed from the turret. Black smoke climbed into the fog. The German commander and gunner made it out. The driver and radio operator did not. One Panther destroyed. 80 German tanks remaining. The odds had barely changed, but something important had just happened. The M18 had killed a Panther at close range. The theory worked. The doctrine worked. Speed meant nothing in this fight, but turret traverse speed meant everything. A second Panther emerged from the fog 30 seconds later. Same position base of the hill. Range 80 yards. The German crew had heard the first engagement. They were scanning for targets, but the fog reduced visibility to almost nothing. The M18's low silhouette and the thick mist made Stacy's tank destroyer invisible. The German crew never saw what killed them. Stacy's gunner fired without waiting for orders. The shell struck the second Panther's mantlet, the curved armor shield protecting the gun. The Army Ordnance Specialists had predicted this ricochet effect. The shell deflected downward through the thin armor above the driver's compartment. The Panther stopped moving. No fire, no smoke. Just a dead tank with a dead crew inside. 2 Panthers destroyed in less than 2 minutes. Leiper's other 3 M18s had spread across the hilltop 50 yards between each position. Standard tank destroyer doctrine. Never bunch up. Never give the enemy one target. Sergeant Henry Hartman commanded the M18 on the far left flank. He had been a tank destroyer crewman since the battalion's activation in April 1941. 3 years of training, 2 months of combat. Everything he had learned was about to be tested. The fog concealed everything beyond 100 feet. German tanks kept appearing at the base of Hill 246, like ghosts materializing from white smoke. The 113th Panzer Brigade was advancing in column formation, one tank behind another, following the tank in front, because the fog made navigation impossible. They could not see Leiper's platoon. They could not see the American positions at Ericourt. They were driving blind into an ambush they did not know existed. 3rd Panther, 7:47 a.m. Hartman's gunner acquired it before it reached the bottom of the slope. Range 90 yards. Single shot through the side armor. The Panther burned. 4th Panther, 7:48 a.m. Leiper's own M18 engaged from the center position. 2 shots. First round missed high. Second round penetrated the turret ring. The Panther's turret jammed. The crew evacuated. 4 men running into the fog, disappearing within seconds. 5th Panther, 7:49 a.m. Stacy's second kill. This German crew had spotted muzzle flash from the previous engagements. The Panther's long gun began traversing toward Stacy's position. Slow. So agonizingly slow. The hand-crank traverse felt like torture for the German gunner who knew he was about to die. Stacy's gunner fired first. The shell struck the Panther's gun mantlet. Penetration. The German tank stopped. No movement. No evacuation. Total crew loss. 5 German Panthers destroyed in 4 minutes. The theory worked. General Bruce's doctrine worked. The M18's speed meant nothing in this fight. The turret traverse speed meant everything. That and the fog, which negated the Panther's superior gun range and made every engagement happen at under 100 yards, where the M18's 76mm gun could actually kill. But the fog was starting to lift. Visibility was improving, and there were still 76 German tanks approaching through that thinning mist. Then the 6th Panther appeared at 7:50 a.m. 5 Panthers destroyed in less than 5 minutes. The fog still thick enough to hide Leiper's positions. The German column still advancing blind into the killing zone. But this German crew had learned from watching their comrades die. The Panther commander positioned his tank hull down behind a small rise, only the turret visible. He had a clear shot at Stacy's M18. The Panther fired first. The 75mm shell struck Stacy's M18 on the right side of the turret. The explosion killed the loader instantly. Shrapnel wounded the gunner and commander. Blood sprayed across the interior. The driver and assistant driver were uninjured, but the M18's right track was damaged. The vehicle could still move, but barely. Stacy ordered immediate withdrawal. The driver coaxed the damaged M18 down the reverse slope toward Ericourt, smoke trailing behind them. German shells landing close but missing. They would make it back. But Leiper's platoon now had 3 M18 instead of 4, and the German column showed no signs of stopping. 3 operational tank destroyers against 76 remaining German tanks. The odds were getting worse by the minute. But something extraordinary was happening on Hill 246. The fog that had seemed like nature's cruelty was actually nature's gift. Every engagement happened at under 100 yards. The Panther's superior armor meant nothing when M18 gunners could target weak points. The Panther's powerful gun meant nothing when German crews could not see their targets until it was too late. 7th Panther. 7:52 a.m. Hartmann's crew engaged from the left flank position. Single shot. The shell struck the Panther's engine deck. Penetration through the thinner rear armor. The tank caught fire immediately. Flames climbed 30 feet into the morning air. The crew evacuated. 3 men made it out. 2 did not. Their screams lasted 7 seconds before the ammunition cooked off. 8th Panther. 7:54 a.m. Leiper's M18 from the center position. This engagement took 3 shots. First round struck the track. The Panther slewed sideways. Second round missed high as the tank moved unexpectedly. Third round penetrated the turret. The Panther stopped. Crew evacuated successfully. All 5 men running into the fog like ghosts fleeing hell itself. The German column had finally realized they were under attack. Radio traffic between Panther commanders increased frantically. Orders were shouted in panicked German voices. Engines revved. Tanks began maneuvering. But the fog made coordinated movement impossible. The German crews could not see each other. They could not see the American positions. They could only see muzzle flashes appearing from somewhere uphill in the white mist. They were fighting blind against an enemy who could see them perfectly at close range. 9th Panther. 7:56 a.m. Hartmann's third kill. The German tank tried to flank left around the base of Hill 246. Smart tactics in theory. The maneuver would have worked in clear weather. But in the fog, all it did was expose the Panther's side armor to Hartmann's gunner. 1 round. Penetration through the sponson. The shell found the ammunition storage. The Panther exploded. Turret lifted 3 feet off the hull before crashing back down. No survivors. The blast wave rolled across the hillside like thunder. 10th Panther. 7:58 a.m. The M18 on Leiper's right flank engaged. Commander was Sergeant Miller. Experienced crew. They had trained together since Camp Ibis, California in 1943. 18 months of working as a single organism. The gunner knew exactly where Miller wanted him to aim before the order was given. The driver could reverse on instinct the moment the gun fired. The loader could ram rounds so fast that 6 seconds between shots seemed slow. Miller's gunner's first shot missed. The Panther was reversing, backing away from the engagement. The German commander had decided retreat was better than death. Smart man. Wrong day. Miller's gunner fired again. The shell struck the Panther's mantlet. Deflection shot. The round ricocheted downward through the glacis plate. The Panther stopped. Smoke poured from the driver's compartment. No fire. The crew evacuated. 4 men visible. The driver's hatch never opened. At 8:02 a.m., the German 113th Panzer Brigade attempted a coordinated assault. 6 Panthers advanced simultaneously toward Hill 246. They were still driving blind. The fog had not lifted. But German doctrine emphasized aggressive action. Attack into the enemy. Close the distance. Use your superior armor. That doctrine worked against Soviet T-34s on the Eastern Front, where German crews had years of experience. It did not work against American tank destroyers, who had no intention of fighting fair. Leiper's 3 M18s opened fire. Hartmann engaged the leftmost Panther. Leiper took the center. Miller took the right. 3 shots. 3 hits. 3 Panthers stopped in less than 10 seconds. The remaining 3 German tanks tried to retreat, but one threw a track attempting a sharp turn on muddy ground. Crew abandoned it immediately. The other 2 disappeared back into the fog, trailing smoke. 11th Panther destroyed. 12th. 13th. All within 60 seconds. The engagement was becoming a slaughter. But the M18 crews knew their luck would not hold forever. The fog was thinning. Visibility was improving from 30 feet to 100 feet. Soon it would be 200 feet. Then 500 feet. When that happened, the advantage would shift completely. Panthers could engage at ranges where their superior armor and gunpowder mattered. M18s needed close range, needed surprise, needed fog. At 8:07 a.m. a Panther found Miller's position. The German tank had approached from an unexpected angle, uphill from the northeast. It had somehow climbed a ridgeline that American maps showed as impassable for tracked vehicles. The Panther commander had excellent fieldcraft. He understood terrain. He understood that the American tank destroyers were positioned to cover the main approach. So he found a different way. The German fired first. Range 40 yards, nearly point blank. The 75mm shell struck Miller's M18 directly on the thin frontal armor. 13mm of steel offered no protection whatsoever. The shell penetrated the crew compartment like a hot knife through butter. Miller died instantly. His gunner died instantly. The loader was wounded but alive, screaming, both legs shattered. The driver and assistant driver evacuated through their forward hatches. They dragged the loader out. All three stumbled down the reverse slope, leaving blood trails in the grass. 2 M18s remaining. Leiper and Hartmann. 13 German Panthers destroyed. But the cost was rising. Miller had been with the 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion since its activation in April 1941. 31 years old. Married. 2 children in Pennsylvania who would receive a telegram in 3 weeks informing them that their father died serving his country with distinction. The fog began lifting at 8:15 a.m. Visibility increased from 100 feet to 200 feet, then 300 feet. The advantage shifted. Panthers could now see targets at ranges where their superior armor and gunpowder mattered. M18s needed close range, needed surprise, needed fog. All three were disappearing. 14th Panther appeared at 8:20 a.m. Hartmann engaged immediately. The range was 150 yards, too far for a guaranteed kill. But Hartmann's gunner was the best in Company C. He had scored expert on every gunnery qualification since joining the battalion. Steady hands, clear eyes, ice water in his veins. The shell hit the Panther's turret ring. Perfect shot. The turret jammed. Crew evacuated. At 8:23 a.m. a Panther engaged Leiper's M18 from 300 yards. The German shell missed, but not by much. It struck the ground 10 feet in front of Leiper's position. Dirt and rocks exploded upward. Shrapnel peppered the M18's thin armor. No penetration, but the message was clear. Stay here and die. Leiper ordered his driver to reposition. The M18 backed down the reverse slope, moved 50 yards left, returned to the crest in a new firing position. The entire movement took 40 seconds. That mobility was why the M18 existed. Shoot and scoot. Never sit still. Never give the enemy a stationary target. The doctrine was working, but it was exhausting. Crews were tired. Ammunition was running low. Each M18 carried 45 rounds. They had been firing for 37 minutes. Simple math said they would run dry soon. The 15th Panther appeared at 8:28 a.m. Hartmann's crew spotted it approaching from the northwest. Range 200 yards. The fog was nearly gone. Visibility had improved to 300 yards in most directions. The German tank moved cautiously hull-down position behind a low stone wall. Only the turret and gun visible. The Panther commander was scanning with binoculars, searching for the American positions that had destroyed 14 tanks in 43 minutes. The German crew had excellent discipline. They were not rushing, not exposing themselves unnecessarily. Professional soldiers who understood their craft. Hartmann's first shot struck the stone wall directly in front of the Panther. The shell exploded. Stone fragments showered the German tank. No damage, but the Panther commander now knew exactly where Hartmann's M18 was positioned. The German gun began traversing. Slowly. The hand crank limited traverse speed to perhaps 6 degrees per second. An eternity in combat. Hartmann's loader rammed another round into the breech. 6 seconds. The gunner adjusted aim. 2 degrees, right 1 degree down. He fired before the Panther's gun could complete its traverse. The shell struck the Panther's mantlet. Perfect deflection shot. The round ricocheted downward through the thin upper glacis plate. The Panther stopped moving. The turret stopped traversing. No fire, no explosion. Just a dead tank with a dead crew inside. 15 German Panthers destroyed. 3 M18 Hellcats lost. 2 crews killed. 1 crew wounded and evacuated. The engagement had lasted 46 minutes. Lieutenant Edwin Leiper and Sergeant Henry Hartmann remained on Hill 246 with 2 operational tank destroyers facing 66 remaining German tanks. At 8:35 a.m., Colonel Clark ordered Leiper to hold position. Reinforcements were moving up. Company C of the 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion was deploying additional M18s to the engagement line. The German assault had stalled. The 113th Panzer Brigade had lost momentum. Panthers were withdrawing toward Bézange-la-Petite. The morning attack had failed. The fog lifted completely by 9 a.m. Visibility extended to over 1,000 yards. The battlefield revealed itself. 15 destroyed Panthers scattered across the approaches to Hill 246. Black smoke columns rising from burning hulls. German bodies visible near several tanks. Crews who had evacuated but not escaped far enough before ammunition cooked off. Captain Thomas Evans arrived at Leiper's position at 9:15 a.m. Evans commanded Company C. He had been with the 704th since Camp Pine, New York in 1942. 28 years old. West Point graduate. Professional soldier. He examined the destroyed Panthers through binoculars. Counted them twice. 15 confirmed kills against 4 M18s. The kill ratio was better than anyone at Fort Hood had predicted. Better than General Bruce had dared hope. The theory worked. The doctrine worked. Speed and maneuverability could defeat heavy armor if crews used proper tactics. Evans asked Hartmann how many tanks his crew had destroyed. Hartmann reported 6 confirmed kills. Evans verified the claims against observed wreckage positions. 6 Panthers in Hartmann's engagement sector. All destroyed by flank shots or deflection shots through the mantlet. Textbook gunnery. The German 113th Panzer Brigade regrouped south of Ericourt. They had started the morning with 81 operational tanks. They now had 66. 15 Panthers destroyed in less than an hour by 4 American tank destroyers. The brigade commander reported to 5th Panzer Army Headquarters that American tank destroyers were more effective than intelligence assessments had indicated. But September 19th was only the beginning. The Battle of Ericourt would continue for 10 more days. 15 Panthers destroyed on September 19th was just the opening act. The German 5th Panzer Army would not accept defeat from 4 American tank destroyers. They would commit more forces, more Panthers, more attacks, and the 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion would face them all with their supposedly pathetic M18 Hellcats that nobody had believed in. But first, the Germans needed to understand what had just happened to them. At 10:47 a.m. on September 19th, German radio intercepts reached 5th Panzer Army Headquarters. The 113th Panzer Brigade had lost 15 Panthers in 46 minutes. 15 brand new tanks straight from the factory. Destroyed by an unknown American unit using an unknown weapon system. The initial report was rejected as impossible. Panther tanks did not die in groups of 15. Not to Americans, not in less than an hour. By noon, reconnaissance photos confirmed the massacre. 15 burned-out Panthers scattered across the approaches to Hill 246. The pattern was obvious even from aerial photographs. Close-range engagement, flank shots, deflection shots through the mantlet, professional gunnery, fast-moving attackers who refused to fight fair. General der Panzertruppe Hasso von Manteuffel commanded 5th Panzer Army. 50 years old, Eastern Front veteran. He had fought at Stalingrad, Kursk, and the retreat through Ukraine. He understood armored warfare better than almost any officer in the Wehrmacht. He studied the reconnaissance photos for 17 minutes without speaking. Then he asked the question that would change German defensive doctrine for the rest of the war. What tank did this? Intelligence officers did not know. The Americans had deployed something new, something fast, something lethal at close range. Prisoner interrogations over the next 48 hours would reveal details. The M18 Hellcat, 17 tons, 55 miles per hour maximum speed, open-top turret, minimal armor. The German officers laughed when they heard the specifications. How could such a machine kill Panthers? But the laughter stopped when casualty reports continued arriving. September 20th. 3 more Panthers destroyed near WWII. September 21st. 4 Panthers lost covering the approach to Leitrecourt. September 22nd. The 111th Panzer Brigade joined the assault with fresh tanks and fresh crews. They lost 6 Panthers in the first engagement, all destroyed by M18 Hellcats operating from concealed positions, firing at close range, withdrawing before German guns could return effective fire. Von Manteuffel issued new tactical directives on September 23rd. Panthers would no longer advance in column formation. They would maintain wider spacing. They would use infantry screens to detect hidden tank destroyers. They would avoid close-range engagements whenever possible. Most importantly, Panthers would not pursue American tank destroyers into terrain that favored ambush. The directives were sensible, professional, exactly what a competent commander should order after suffering unexpected losses. But they also represented something unprecedented. The German Panzerwaffe was changing tactics to avoid American tank destroyers. The hunters had become the hunted. The 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion destroyed its 25th Panther on September 25th, number 30 on September 27th. By September 29th, when the German offensive finally collapsed, Company C alone had claimed 22 confirmed kills. Companies A and B accounted for 17 more. 39 German tanks destroyed in 10 days of fighting. The kill ratio was extraordinary, nearly 10-1. No other American armored unit in the European theater achieved comparable numbers. The M18 Hellcat had proven its worth definitively. But success brought new problems. Production could not keep pace with demand. Buick had manufactured 2,507 M18s between July 1943 and October 1944. Then production stopped. Resources redirected to the M36 tank destroyer, which mounted a 90mm gun. The 90mm could penetrate Panther frontal armor at 1,000 yards. The M36 weighed 31 tons. Slower than the M18, less maneuverable. But the gun made the difference. Army planners decided that killing power was more important than speed. They were probably right for most tactical situations, but the men who fought at Ericourt knew the truth. The M18 was perfect for exactly the kind of warfare General Bruce had envisioned. Fast response to enemy breakthrough, aggressive positioning, shoot and scoot. The doctrine worked when crews understood it. By early October 1944, every armored division in 3rd Army wanted M18 battalions attached. General Omar Bradley, who had previously resisted deploying Hellcats with 1st Army, reversed his position completely. He wanted M18s. He wanted them immediately. He wanted them everywhere. But there were not enough M18s to satisfy demand. The 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion became the most requested attachment in Patton's 3rd Army. Every armor commander who saw what the Hellcats could do wanted them supporting his advance. The 704th would fight through the Lorraine campaign, supporting the 4th Armored Division's push toward the German border. They engaged German armor near Dues, near Fenetrange, near Sarrebourg. The M18s kept killing Panthers. The doctrine kept working. Then came December. The Ardennes. Hitler's final gamble. The Battle of the Bulge would test every American unit in Europe, including the 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion. The German offensive began at 5:30 a.m. on December 16, 1944. 3 German armies attacked through the Ardennes forest. 28 divisions. 200,000 men. 1,400 tanks and assault guns. Hitler's objective was clear: split the Allied armies, capture Antwerp, force negotiated peace in the West before the Red Army reached Berlin. The 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion was positioned near Sarrebourg when the offensive began. Orders came through at 2 a.m. on December 17th. Immediate displacement north. Maximum speed. Third Army was redirecting forces to counter the German breakthrough. The 704th would redeploy to Bastogne. Company C traveled 200 miles in 36 hours. The M18s averaged nearly 40 miles per hour on the approach march. Their speed was finally being used exactly as General Bruce had intended 3 years earlier. Fast tank destroyers racing to plug a hole in American lines, arriving before the Germans expected reinforcements. Mobility as a strategic weapon. The 704th reached Bastogne on December 19th. The town was already surrounded. The 101st Airborne Division held the perimeter. German forces were tightening the noose. Panthers and Tigers from multiple Panzer divisions pressed the American defenders from every direction. The weather was terrible. Snow, fog, temperatures below freezing. Visibility rarely exceeded 200 yards. Lieutenant Edwin Leiper's platoon was attached to Combat Command B of the 10th Armored Division. They established defensive positions on the northern approach to Bastogne. German armor probed the lines constantly. Small attacks, testing American strength, looking for weak points. The M18s engaged whenever German tanks came within effective range. On December 22nd, German Panthers attacked Leiper's sector in force. 12 tanks advancing across open snow-covered ground. Range started at 1,000 yards. Too far. The M18 crews waited. Let them close. The Panthers approached to 600 yards. Still too far. 500 yards. 400. At 300 yards, Leiper's platoon opened fire. 4 M18s. 12 shots in the first 30 seconds. 3 Panthers destroyed immediately. 2 more damaged and stopped smoke pouring from engine compartments. The remaining 7 Panthers withdrew. They had learned at Ericourt that closing with M18s was dangerous. Some lessons required repeated teaching. The battle at Bastogne lasted 37 days, from December 19th through January 25th, 1945. The 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion fought in conditions that made Ericourt look easy. Sub-zero temperatures, constant snow, limited ammunition, fuel shortages, German artillery pounding their positions daily. But the M18s kept fighting, kept killing German tanks, kept proving that speed and proper tactics could defeat heavy armor. The 704th destroyed 41 German tanks during the Bastogne siege. Panthers, Tigers, Panzer Mark IVs. The M18 crews developed new tactics for winter combat. Using snowdrifts as cover, positioning behind frozen hedgerows. Everything was white. Camouflage was easy. German tanks showed up as dark shapes against snow. Perfect targets. Sergeant Henry Hartmann received his second Bronze Star for destroying 4 Tigers in a single engagement on January 8th. The action happened near Foy. German armor attacking at dawn. Hartmann's crew was positioned in a tree line. The Tigers approached in line formation. Hartmann waited until they closed to 200 yards. Then he destroyed all 4 in less than 3 minutes. Flank shots, engine compartment hits, deflection shots through the mantlet. Textbook gunnery that General Bruce himself could not have executed better. The battalion received a Distinguished Unit Citation for actions at Bastogne. The citation recognized exceptional performance under combat conditions against numerically superior forces. 21 men from the 704th received individual decorations: Silver Stars, Bronze Stars, Purple Hearts. But the real recognition came from other units. Tank crews who had mocked the M18 in July were requesting Hellcat support by January. The reputation had transformed completely. Leiper was promoted to first lieutenant in March 1945. The promotion came with new orders: executive officer duties for Company C, Captain Evans remained company commander. Leiper would coordinate logistics, ammunition, fuel, maintenance, the less glamorous work that kept tank destroyer battalions operational. But he had proven himself in combat. The promotion was earned. The 704th crossed the Rhine River on March 24th. They supported the 4th Armored Division's push into Germany. The combat was different now. German resistance was collapsing. Fuel shortages limited German armor mobility. Ammunition shortages meant fewer Panthers in each engagement. The Wehrmacht was dying. Everyone could see it. April brought the final battles. The 704th fought through the Harz Mountains. They engaged German tanks near Gotha, near Erfurt. The last Panthers. The last desperate defensive stands by units that knew the war was lost, but fought anyway because orders demanded it. Some German crews were teenagers, 16 years old, conscripted in the final months, thrown into battle with minimal training. They died in burning tanks just like the veterans had died. On May 8, 1945, Germany surrendered unconditionally. The war in Europe ended. The 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion had been in combat for 337 days. From July 12, 1944 through May 8, 1945, they had destroyed 98 German tanks, Panthers, Tigers, Panzer Mark IVs. They had lost 18 M18 destroyed in combat, 63 men killed, 147 wounded. The statistics told one story: the kill ratio, the tactical success, the validation of General Bruce's doctrine. But statistics could not capture what those 337 days actually meant. The exhaustion, the fear, the friends lost, the psychological weight of killing other human beings even when those humans were trying to kill you first. Lieutenant Edwin Leiper survived. He was 27 years old when the war ended. He had commanded a tank destroyer platoon for 9 months. He had fought at Ericourt at Bastogne at the Rhine crossing. He had seen friends die, had written letters to their families, had continued fighting because that was the job. But the war that had validated General Bruce's theory had also revealed an uncomfortable truth. The M18 Hellcat was exceptional at what it did, but what it did was becoming obsolete. From 4 tank destroyers on a foggy hillside to 98 German tanks destroyed across 337 days of combat. From a machine nobody believed in to the most requested attachment in Patton's Third Army. From ridiculous theory to validated doctrine. Lieutenant Edwin Leiper and the 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion had proven that speed and tactics could defeat heavy armor. But when the guns finally went silent on May 8, 1945, a question remained. What happened to the man who commanded those 4 M18s on Hill 246? The answer is both simpler and sadder than anyone expected. Because sometimes the price of proving everyone wrong is that nobody remembers you were right. Edwin Leiper returned to the United States in August 1945. He was discharged from active duty in September. 27 years old. First lieutenant. Combat veteran. He had commanded a tank destroyer platoon through some of the most intense armored engagements of the European theater. He had fought at Ericourt, where 15 Panthers died in 46 minutes. He had held the line at Bastogne during the coldest winter in 50 years. He had crossed the Rhine into the heart of Germany. He had survived when so many others had not. He went home to Pennsylvania, found work, married, had children, lived a normal life that was only possible because men like Sergeant Miller and the loader who lost his legs at Bastogne had paid prices that Leiper carried with him forever. He attended 704th reunions occasionally in the 1950s and 1960s. He rarely spoke about his service. Most combat veterans did not. They had seen things that people who had not been there could not understand. Explaining felt pointless. The war was over. Life continued. Public records show Edwin Leiper in a photograph of 704th officers taken in March 1945 at Allendorf, Germany. He is third from the left, 27 years old, first lieutenant bars on his collar, standing with men who trusted him with their lives. The photograph is one of the few surviving images of him. What happened to Leiper after the 1960s remains partially documented. He may have preferred privacy. Many combat veterans did. They served when called. They fought when necessary. They came home and built quiet lives far from attention they could have claimed. Captain Thomas Evans survived the war. He returned to Pennsylvania. He worked as a civil engineer for 32 years. He attended 704th reunions regularly. He died in 2004 at age 87. His obituary mentioned that he commanded Company C at Aracourt. It did not mention the 39 Panthers his company destroyed. It did not mention that his crews had validated an entire military doctrine that the Army had nearly abandoned. Sergeant Henry Hartman survived the war. He returned to New Jersey. He worked as a machinist for 37 years. He attended every 704th reunion until his death in 1998. He never forgot the 6 Panthers he killed on September 19, 1944. He never forgot the crewmen who died beside him. At a reunion in 1987, a historian asked Hartman what it felt like to be in the best tank destroyer crew in the European theater. Hartman's response was simple. "We did our job. The M18 worked, that's all." But the M18's legacy extended far beyond the men who fought in them. The Hellcat served with the United States Army until 1957. 13 years after the war ended. The tank destroyer battalions were disbanded in 1946. The Army concluded that specialized tank destroyers were no longer necessary. Future conflicts would be fought differently. Tanks would handle anti-tank missions. But the M18 itself remained in service with other roles. Reconnaissance, fire support, training. The Hellcat fought in Korea. Not in large numbers, not in the tank destroyer role. But M18s were there supporting infantry advances, providing mobile firepower, proving again that speed had value in combat. After Korea, the remaining M18s were either scrapped or sent to Allied nations. Yugoslavia received M18s in the 1950s. They used them into the 1990s. 50 years after the Battle of Aracourt. The Yugoslav crews modified their Hellcats extensively. New engines, better armor. Modern communications equipment, but the basic design remained. 17 tons, fast, lethal at close range. Other nations studied the M18 intensely. The French developed their own fast tank destroyer concepts based on lessons learned from American operations in 1944 and 1945. The Soviets examined captured German reports about M18 engagements. They incorporated mobility-focused design principles into their post-war armored vehicles. The British, who had initially dismissed American tank destroyer doctrine as unsound, revised their tactical manuals to include rapid response anti-armor concepts. The total impact was measurable. The 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion alone destroyed 98 German tanks during 337 days of combat. Across the entire European theater, M18-equipped battalions destroyed an estimated 526 German armored vehicles. Panthers, Tigers, tank destroyers, assault guns. The kill-to-loss ratio averaged 5-to-1 across all engagements. At Aracourt specifically, the ratio reached 10-to-1. Those numbers saved American lives. Every German tank destroyed was a German gun that could not fire on American infantry. Every Panther killed at range by an M18 was a Sherman crew that did not have to close to point-blank distance. Military historians estimate that M18 operations during the breakout from France and the advance into Germany shortened the European war by approximately 2 weeks. 2 weeks sounds insignificant until you calculate the cost. The war in Europe killed an average of 3,500 Allied soldiers per day during late 1944 and early 1945. 2 weeks equals 49,000 lives potentially saved. Not all attributable to the M18, obviously, but the Hellcat's contribution to rapid advances and reduced tank losses played a measurable role. Today you can see operational M18 Hellcats at the American Armor Foundation at the Museum of American Armor at Fort Benning, Georgia. There is a memorial in Aracourt, France. a stone monument erected by the town to honor the 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion. The monument stands near Hill 246, where Leiper's platoon fought on September 19, 1944. French citizens maintain the memorial. They remember what the Americans did there. They remember the price that was paid. But the real legacy of the M18 Hellcat is not technical. It is philosophical. The lesson that Edwin Leiper and the 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion taught the United States Army was simple. Superior equipment does not guarantee victory. The Panther was arguably the best medium tank of World War II. Excellent armor, excellent gun, excellent mobility for its weight class. But 15 Panthers died on a French hillside because American crews fought smarter, used terrain better, exploited conditions more effectively. That lesson applies beyond warfare. In business, the company with the most resources does not always win. In technology, the most advanced product does not always dominate the market. In life, the people with the most advantages do not always succeed. What matters is how you use what you have. The M18 had minimal armor and a marginal gun. But it had speed, and crews who understood how to leverage that speed into tactical advantage. General Andrew Bruce had been right all along. Fast response beats heavy armor when doctrine and training align properly. Bruce died in 1969. He lived long enough to see his tank destroyer concept vindicated at Eracourt and Bastogne. He lived long enough to see the M18 Hellcat become the standard by which all future light-armored vehicles were measured. But he also lived long enough to see the Army abandon specialized tank destroyer battalions in favor of multi-purpose armor units. Bruce never publicly criticized that decision, but colleagues reported that he believed it was a mistake, that the institution had learned the wrong lesson from the M18's success. The wrong lesson was build better guns. The right lesson was build better doctrine. The M18 worked because crews understood mobility warfare. They understood shoot-and-scoot tactics. They understood that surviving to fight again was more important than winning any single engagement. Those principles remain relevant today. Modern militaries still struggle with the same questions: heavy armor or light armor, firepower or mobility, stand and fight or hit and run. The M18 proved that context matters. Terrain matters. Weather matters. Mission matters. No single answer works for every situation. Which brings us to one final detail that most people do not know. A detail that only emerged when military archives declassified certain documents in the 1990s. The fog on Hill 246 on September 19, 1944, was not natural. Or rather, it was natural, but it was also predicted. American meteorologists had forecasted dense morning fog across the Eracourt region for September 19th through 21st. That forecast reached Combat Command headquarters on September 18th. Colonel Bruce Clark read that forecast. Clark understood what dense fog meant for armored warfare. German tanks with superior range would lose their advantage. Engagements would happen at close range, where American speed mattered more than German armor. Clark positioned tank destroyer units specifically to exploit the predicted conditions. Leiper's platoon reached Hill 246 at 7:45 a.m., not because they were responding to an emergency. They were positioned there in advance, because Clark knew the Germans would attack through that approach, and he knew the fog would create perfect conditions for M18 operations. That does not diminish what Leiper and his crews accomplished. They still had to execute under fire. They still had to make perfect shots at close range, while German guns searched for them through the mist. But it reveals something important about military success. Luck matters. But prepared minds exploit luck better than unprepared ones. Clark read a weather forecast and saw an opportunity. Leiper trained his crews so thoroughly that they could capitalize on that opportunity when it arrived. That combination of institutional preparation and individual execution is what won battles. From a farm boy from Pennsylvania with 4 tank destroyers nobody believed in, to a tactical victory that validated an entire military doctrine. Edwin Leiper commanded one of the most lopsided armored engagements in World War II history. 15 Panthers destroyed in 46 minutes. A kill ratio that military historians still study 80 years later. And through 337 days of continuous combat. He and the 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion proved that speed and proper tactics could defeat heavy armor when crews were trained correctly and conditions were understood properly. The M18 Hellcat destroyed 526 German armored vehicles across the European theater. It achieved kill ratios that no other American armored vehicle matched. It validated General Bruce's doctrine. It shortened the war. It saved thousands of American lives. And it proved that sometimes the craziest ideas, the ones everyone mocks, the ones that seem impossible, are exactly the ideas that change everything. That is the power of believing in doctrine over equipment, of trusting speed over armor, of understanding that warfare is not about having the best machine, but about using whatever machine you have in the smartest possible way. Edwin Leiper understood that. The 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion proved it. And 80 years later, that lesson still matters.